Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, I'm talking about Vinyl Me Please and where the new owners are at and getting this once great company back on their feet. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So if you're unfamiliar with what Vinyl Me Please is, they are a record subscription service that started, I think it was 2013 when they first started, and you subscribe to their service and they send out a record of the month. At the height of their popularity, they had thousands of subscribers across the globe, buying new albums every single month from the company, and they were widely seen as the gold standard in record of the month clubs. So if you haven't been following this Vinyl Me Please saga that's been going on for the last, probably 18 months now, it all started really last spring when it was found out that the former CEO and CFO of the company had been funneling money, or allegedly funneling money, out of Vinyl Me Please and into this record pressing plant that the Vinyl Me Please was not supposed to have any kind of financial vested interest in. It was supposed to just be a partnership between Vinyl Me Please and Vinyl Media Pressing to kind of get this pressing plant operational, and for that pressing plant to in turn start pressing records for Vinyl Me Please. And then after they fired the CEO and CFO, and there were lawsuits, and like I said, it's been a big ordeal for the last 18 months. But Vinyl Me Please started going through and cutting costs, cutting services, trying to kind of pare down what their expenditures were to try to recoup some of that money they had lost. And they started driving away a lot of customers, and people started canceling their membership. I was one of those people that decided to cancel my membership last year. And then what happened earlier this year is Vinyl Me Please went into liquidation. And they were still sending out emails, and they were still running their website, looking like they were still bringing in new memberships, and were still planning on selling new albums and sending out memberships every month. But that wasn't the case. They were already in liquidation. There was no intent to ever fulfill any of those orders that were coming in. And then Vinyl, which is a competitor to Vinyl Me Please, stepped in a few weeks back, maybe a month or so back now, and bought the company out of bankruptcy in an attempt to save this once great company. So after Vinyl bought Vinyl Me Please, Nick Alt took over as the new CEO of the company, and Emily, I think she pronounced her last name, Hubarak, took over as the new COO. And I was very optimistic when all this news broke that Vinyl was taking over. Honestly, I'd never been a subscriber to Vinyl. I do know a couple of people that had subscribed to their service for a while and had nothing but great things to say. But the more I dug through into this company over the last couple of weeks, I don't want to put anything negative out there, but there are some mixed reviews on the service from the company. But I haven't dealt with them personally, so I don't want to go too deep into how Vinyl does their subscription services. But I was a subscriber to Vinyl Me Please for a long time, and I was really hopeful that we would see this company kind of stand back up and go back to what it was before the last 18 or 24 months. One thing I give Nick and Emily a ton of credit for is that they're trying to be more transparent with where they are at in this process. So they announced earlier in the week that they were going to do a question and answer live. They were going to try to answer as many questions that people had about the service, because there are a ton of really pissed off customers that are out potentially hundreds and hundreds of dollars due to, outstanding subscription services or credits that are owed to them through Vinyl Me Please. Like I said, there's a lot of people out there that are standing to lose a lot of money. So they're at least trying to be open and transparent to all those subscribers that they have that are angry, because that's what's going to take to kind of build this company back up. So Nick is the founder of Vinyl. He has a background in music, background in technology. So he's somebody that's been around the block. He knows this industry. He knows what it takes to run a company like Vinyl Me Please. Yes, Vinyl is not the size of Vinyl Me Please, but he at least knows what he's doing. I just don't think he really understood how deep the troubles go in Vinyl Me Please until he got the keys to the company and started digging through it all. It looks like Emily's not a stranger to this either. She's been a part of Vinyl since the beginning of 2024. She's worked in consulting before. She's been a partner in Vinyl Capital Partners, which sounds like, at least what I read about the company, sounds like a venture capitalist kind of company where they go in and they kind of primarily focus on music companies, go in, try to help right the ship in those companies. So from the outside, it looks like they're the right people to step in and buy Vinyl Me Please. But the question I've had is where they're at in this process, what's going on, because ever since it was announced a few weeks ago, it's been kind of radio silent since. So this past Thursday, they did a question and answer, and initially they thought a couple of hundred people would show up. I think there were about 1,100 people that showed up for this question and answer. And they kind of went through the whole process about how a couple of months back, I think it was April, Vinyl Me Please went into insolvency, and it sounds like they kind of stepped in early in that process with the intent to take over the company. But in all reality, as they're recording this video, it only been like 2 weeks that they've actually had control of this company. I think they said it was around Memorial Day that they became the actual owners of Vinyl Me Please. But one thing they stressed in this question and answer is they took over Vinyl Me Please. They were not able to retain the money that was brought in from all these pre-orders from the previous memberships. They were just taking over the company now and moving forward with whatever inventory they had. So any money that they were going to have to spend to get those albums pressed and out to people, it was going to be out of their own pocket. But they said this several times to stress the fact that this was something that they needed to do to help Vinyl Me Please survive. And that's really going to be the best way to rebuild those broken relationships that they've had with their subscribers that have really kind of fallen apart over the last year. The thing I was really surprised to hear them say is that there's over 120,000 outstanding items to customers. They did say that they plan to fulfill all those outstanding orders, but it's going to take them time. And there's also 30 plus projects that they inherited that are in all different kind of stages of the process. Some are in pre-production, some have been pressed, some they actually have to go back to the label and renegotiate those licensing agreements because technically it's a new company. So those licensing agreements were with that old entity of Vinyl Me Please. So they've got to go back, even on albums they've already pressed, they're sitting on that, they just need to mail out to customers. They've got to go back through and renegotiate those contracts, and doing all of that without having the money from those previous sales. But they stressed multiple times over the course of this hour-long question answer that they intend to fulfill as many orders as possible. And with the orders that they're not going to be able to fulfill, they will help you go through the process of making a claim to try to get that money back. But they hope that that's a very rare instance. They hope to get all these orders shipped out eventually. One of the Vinyl Me Please releases that I almost pre-ordered when it was announced was Dropkick Murphys' Ready to Die. I have a pressing of it already. It's kind of pricey through Vinyl Me Please, so I decided to hold off. I figured once it gets pressed and gets released, maybe I'll be able to grab a copy off of Discogs. And then all this stuff happened, and I was really glad I didn't pre-order it. They did say that's one of the titles that they have not yet pressed, but they hope to here in the near future. And they didn't get into details. I knew they weren't going to get into this kind of detail, but they did say that there's a lot of money that's still owed to vendors and to customers. And now they've got to go back to those vendors and those labels and renegotiate deals after they've been burned time and time again by Vinyl Me Please over the last year plus. One of the questions I had going into this whole process is, what is Vinyl Me Please going to do? You've got all these monthly subscribers people are still locked into their subscriptions, but they did say that they're not going to bill anybody until they're able to get everything caught up. So whatever months there are from now until they get caught up, start shipping things out, no one's going to be billed for anything that's due. So whatever your monthly subscription price is, they put a hold on all that and you're not going to be billed for those months. And they do have the goal of shipping out 90% of what's owed by the end of summer this year, which I think is a lofty expectation. But, it sounds like they're really dedicated to this process. They've already begun the process of moving all of the physical inventory from Vinyl Me Please in Colorado to where vinyl is based out of in the Midwest. And I understand that this could all be just talk coming from the new owners of Vinyl Me Please, just trying to salvage what they can from this company. But from what I heard from this question and answer session, this hour-long session that they had, they seem honest in what they're trying to do. And it sounds like they're really trying to be transparent in this process, discussing how they got where they are right now, what they're doing with the company right now, and what they envision the future being for Vinyl Me Please. And they completely understand why so many people cancel their subscriptions when all this started leaking out a few months back, and why so many people are frustrated with Vinyl Me Please, because they've been owed several months worth of albums now and have a lot of money that's just kind of sitting out there that they're hoping they're eventually going to get product for. So as far as the future of Vinyl Me Please goes, Nick Alt during the question and answer did say that they intend to bring the Essentials track back. They are going to have some other tracks also, but that's the one he mentioned by name. And he did say, he kind of alluded to the fact that one of the issues Vinyl Me Please had was they just oversaturated themselves with so many different titles and so many different tracks. And that's one of the things that really ended up crippling the company. So it sounds like they're going to be a little more limited in what they're going to release every month, but it's going to be all in an attempt to have it be more of a manageable company. They're also looking at changing how the billing cycle works for Vinyl Me Please, because previously you would get billed at the beginning of the month, and then your albums wouldn't get shipped until the very end of the month. So they did mention during the question and answer, they're looking at doing a 1 to 2 week window where you would get billed and then shortly after your albums would actually get shipped out to you. One of my big questions going into this question and answer was, how are they going to deal with all the outstanding credits people are owed? Because a lot of people, if you didn't like that month's release and didn't really think that there was anything else to get that month, you could just trade in your monthly album for store credit. And I had some store credit. I did end up using it before all this stuff broke. So I didn't have anything that's really owed to me, but there are people that have literally hundreds of dollars in credits that are owed to them from Vinyl Me Please. And I was glad to see that Nick directly addressed this question. Unfortunately, he said there's no good way for customers to redeem those credits, but they are looking at different ways to make customers whole. It's not going to be a dollar for dollar value, but they're trying to do something to, give people that have all those outstanding credits some kind of value. I think that's one of the big things, or one of the biggest things about the new Vinyl Me Please moving forward is I'm interested to see how all that plays out. Also, during this hour-long session, they did make a commitment to fulfilling all outstanding subscriptions. They're going to get everyone that's owed albums, they're going to get those albums shipped, and they're going to fulfill, if you still have 6, 8, 10 months left on your subscription, they are going to fulfill all those orders also. Even though, like I said earlier, they didn't collect any of the money from those initial sales. Another thing that came out of this question and answer session that I was really interested by is the fact that there was a lot of people out there that, they had these pre-orders sitting out there. All this broke that they were going into liquidation. So they contacted their credit card companies, they got chargebacks, or they were able to get refunds on those orders. And I think it was Nick that said that anyone that canceled those orders were able to get refunds or chargebacks for those orders. Those people are going to have first right at those albums once they get repressed. So if you pre-ordered an album, whether it was TLC Fan Mail, I know that was another big pre-order that they had. If you ordered that and got a chargeback on your credit card and got the money back for that, you are going to have the first opportunity to buy that before it goes out to anyone else, which I think is another great way to kind of help rebuild that relationship. Something else that sounds like they kind of glossed over pretty quickly in this question and answer session was Bandbox, because Vinyl also owns Bandbox. They bought Bandbox in a similar situation that they bought Vinyl Me Please, but it kind of sounds like Bandbox was in a much worse situation. But it also sounds like they are determined to fulfill all those outstanding orders from Bandbox eventually also. One of the questions that were brought up in the question and answer is, how are they going to deal with new refunds? If you still have that order out there and they want a refund for that order, Vinyl Me Please is not going to be able to do that because they weren't the ones that originally took that order. They don't have that cash available to refund it to you. But they did say that if you're somebody in that situation, you do still want to get a refund, reach out to them and they'll help you walk through the claims process. One thing that came up a lot earlier this year before the liquidation news broke was the fact that a lot of people were emailing Vinyl Me Please customer service and not getting any kind of response. Nick did discuss this in the question and answer and said basically the Vinyl Me Please's customer service portal at this point is just a black hole. There's just no way to dig through all those emails in any kind of reasonable time period. So that's another thing on the back end that Nick and Emily are going to have to address and straighten out, because there needs to be some kind of way to reach them through customer service. And something else they touched on in the question and answer is the fact that it's going to take them a long time to dig through this inventory. I think they said there's like over 50 semi-loads worth of albums that are being shipped across the country right now. And a lot of that are albums that are owed to customers. So they've got to go through and process all these albums. That's why I said their intent is to reach 90% completion by the end of summer, but I'll be surprised if they reach that. I think it's a pretty lofty goal, but I think at least by the end of the year, I think a lot of those albums are going to be shipped out to people. So something Vinyl Me Please started doing last year in an attempt to kind of right the ship and try to save face with customers that weren't getting the albums they had pre-ordered, in some cases almost a year earlier, was it created this spreadsheet where you could go on there, look at your album that you pre-ordered, and see some kind of like estimated ship date. But at this point, it sounds like all of that was just a lie. It was all a smoke screen to try to save face. And there were albums on that list that weren't even close to being pressed yet. Another thing that they did announce during this question and answer is the fact that they're going to bring back international shipping. They're going to bring back international memberships, which it was something I thought was really dumb of Vinyl Me Please to cut out last year. I get it. They were trying to save costs wherever they could, but you're losing thousands of subscriptions by cutting off the whole rest of the world from your company. So they didn't set any kind of timetable yet, but they are going to bring that service back. If you are somebody that is a Vinyl Me Please subscriber, or at least looking to potentially subscribe in the future, follow along with them on social media. I think they emailed me about this question and answer session, and they plan to do more of these in the future and try to be as transparent as possible about where they are at in the process. I did find the question and answer session very informative. I liked hearing directly from Nick and Emily. And, I think a lot of the questions I had about Vinyl Me Please and their future were addressed, maybe not fully addressed in the question and answer, but at least touched on. It gives me some kind of hope for Vinyl Me Please moving forward. But it sounds like Nick and Emily have a very big hill to climb to get this company back to where it was even 2 years ago. And even though I was optimistic when I heard that Vinyl had bought Vinyl Me Please, there were still a lot of questions I had. And I think this answered a lot of those. And I'm very optimistic about where the company is going and the future of Vinyl Me Please. So that's also coming from somebody that does not have a big financial interest in Vinyl Me Please and the success of this company. I don't have any pre-orders with them. I canceled my subscription. I don't have any store credits. So I think I have a much more optimistic outlook than a lot of other people do that, have hundreds of dollars wrapped up in this company. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of Vinyl Me Please and where they are at currently in the process. I feel like this saga has turned into like this big soap opera, but I like where they're heading, and I like where they're at right now. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt with where they're at. But I know a lot of people out there have some very strong feelings about this. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.